This is where you join me. All right, so please run your Python. Pause the video if you need to. So here, let's try to put an experiment here. And we say that there is a profit stream. I just copied from the slide there, right? You just copy and paste it here. So I have a profit stream. Um, I don't know, maybe first month, second month, third month, right? And then we want to run through each profit in the list. So we have a list of 3 monthly revenue, let's say, profits, let's say. And for each profit in each of the months, we'll like to know if the profit, right, is greater than 10,000, then we'll print true. True is printable. And otherwise, we print false. Okay, if profit, so yeah, P. So this is a very simple code. We use for to run through each profit and look at it. This is going to be a true because it's greater than 10,000. This is going to be a false and a false. So we should see true, false, false, not surprising. But look at this code. All right, maybe it's still readable, but if we were to do a few more branches of if and padded with some statements, if a long statement, else a long statement, it is going to look a little bit challenging, right? And imagine that we want to beautify this answer. We're not just printing a very curt true, false, true, false. We're going to print something really nice. If it's true, we'll print excellent. We should celebrate. Some suggestions are these, and so on and so forth. So I'm not going to like print out all the text, but let's just simulate that by printing a lot of suggestions. Excellent. So true. Uh, Congratulatory messages. Congratulations, our company has achieved nice things, and so on and so forth. And it is suggested that you may do this and that, and you get the idea. Huh? So I would say something like, okay, dot, 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 to represent a lot of text. Yeah. And so it looks nice and user friendly when we see this. And when it's false, we can say false, and then sorry to see that our company is some sort of a consolation messages, and some suggestions as in how you may improve, some network contacts as in whom you may call, and so it's very nice report. And so when we run this, uh well, it's going to look nice because the dot dot dots are actually very friendly messages, readable, right? So true, blah blah blah, false, blah blah blah, and so on. Nice. But what? But when we come back here, you see that our code is a little bit hard to read, isn't it? Yeah. Uh, it works, no doubt. We saw the results, but it's hard to maintain. And I'm not just showing you some simple lengthy code. What if it's mixed with, more function calls and other stuff that basically lengthens this code and makes it even harder to see the logic. So it's not hard to read because we can understand it, but we are getting some resistance in terms of how clear the logic is. What if, all right, what if we can extract out the whole if else chunk? Yeah, that means we're just trying to say, is profit acceptable? We can do that, and we can cut it out, right? We can cut it out and say, what if we can just call a function and say, is profit acceptable? And then, of course, we need to define a function called is profit acceptable. All right. So caller, that means ourselves later on, need to supply the profit. And now we call it locally profit. Yeah, right. Profit is greater than 10,000, then print true. So this can go into a function. And you might say, well, since it goes into a function, it also makes it very long. True. because that's the value that we are providing to the user. So we're not going to decrease the print statements. But do note that as we are reading through this, we just focus on, is the profit acceptable? Acceptable meaning is large, greater than 10,000. Then we do a lot of printings for nice stuff. And then not true, then we print a suggestive correction steps on whatever it is. And this logic is clear. It's just doing one profit analysis, not over a list. Yeah. But here the emphasis is on traversing through the list and then calculating for each profit in the list. Does it meet our criteria of acceptability? And so at this point, is profit acceptable? Is profit as sorry, spelling mistake. It's going to be so clear, so easy to read, because first of all, it is just a small fraction of the screen space. We can easily absorb the whole structure. The for loop is just one liner. Again, I don't want to use the word compact, so compressed. We're not aiming for compression. We're not aiming to save the storage space, because we're still using as much storage space for user friendliness and readability, user readability. But here we also want to make our code user friendly, programmer friendly, maintenance friendly, so that when we need to check something is wrong with our congratulation message, somehow we forgot to put the exclamation marks, then we can always trace back to the print statements here, for example, and then it will be fixed forever. Yeah. So when we run it again, obviously we're going to see the results, because the logic is quite simple, and it's also very readable. And simple and readable may not be exactly the same thing, but we aim for both. So here, notice one more thing, that although we've been seeing some examples of, I've been showing you the example of trying to reuse the logic using functions, that's not always the aim. So we still use functions, even though we kind of call it one time in a loop. You can say, well, there are three things here, right? So I'm calling it three times. That's true. And we can still, for example, do this. Okay, we are interested in assessing the first profit stream, or we can find let me check if mean is okay. No, not there. We can always find, for example, the sum. Sum is always there. So that's all the profits, and number n is the length of the profit streams, and you get the idea. I'm trying to find the average. So total over n. Is the average acceptable? That would be one of our business goal, right? Because the profits fluctuate up and down, daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. But let's look at the average. Yeah. So when we look at the average, we calculated one time the average, and we calculate, and then we assess, is the average profit acceptable? So this part, no, not acceptable, right? And because there are too many low values to pull down the overall total. So notice that we are running the function one time. Why do we need function? Might as well have a big if else, copy, or rather cut and paste and undefine the function. Now, here we want to balance between readability in terms of the code itself and clarity. So if we did not use the is profit acceptable named function here, it would have been a big if else. And this big if else lacks this very nice function name that is so descriptive of our logic purpose here. Meaning, we're just trying to assess, is our profit acceptable? If there's argument, business argument, about whether acceptable has to be defined at 10,000, we can always come back to this function and say, oh yeah, here we set it to 10,000. If you're not happy with that, let's set it to 20,000 or 5,000, right? So by doing that, the is profit acceptable function name makes our logic very clear, very readable, very understandable. And despite this function not being so readable because it's very long, the purpose is very clear. Can we agree on that? The purpose of this function is very clear. Assess whether the given number that is supposed to refer to some sort of profit, assess whether this is acceptable or not. Okay, all right. So here, hopefully you can find that it is not just because. We definitely reuse functions for productivity's sake. We don't want to repeat the same logic again and again. But even if we call function one time, there are cases where it is remarkably very useful, such as what I've just shown. Okay. All right. So I may have deferred a little bit in terms of the the detail printing and so on, but the essential logic is there. So you can pick up some new stuff like and equals to space to avoid the print function automatically uh, changing the changing or adding an extra new line all the time.